Each step creaked under me like it had something to say, something I wasn't ready to hear. The suitcase wheels clattered behind me, too loud in that quiet stairwell. I held the banister tight, not for balance, but maybe just to feel something. Solid. The metal was cold. Cold like the look she gave when she said, "It's down there." No one offered to carry my things. I hadn't packed much anyway. Just clothes I could fold small and memories I hadn't decided whether to keep. The air changed as I reached the bottom. Damp. Still. A smell that reminded me of wet cement and forgotten laundry, the kind that lingers no matter how many windows you open. At the bottom, I stood still for a moment. Not because I was tired, but because I needed a second to make it real. This wasn't a guest room. This wasn't a temporary thing. This was placement. Quiet placement. The kind people dress up with soft words and nervous smiles, but never really mean to undo. I looked back up the stairs. No one was there. I picked up my bag again and walked forward. The light bulb above buzzed, yellow and tired. I didn't look for a switch. I already knew it wasn't going to get brighter. She smiled when she said it. "Just for now," she said, like it was a favor. The room already smelled like it had been waiting too long. A single bulb swung gently above, casting thin shadows across the boxes and bins. The bed was made, not with love, just made. The blanket was floral and faded, the kind you pull from the back of the closet when someone's visiting for one night, not when someone's staying. I nodded. "Thank you," I said, pretending not to notice the storage bins stacked against the far wall, or the way there was no dresser, no picture frame, just space, borrowed space. She left quickly, footsteps light on the stairs, like maybe if she moved fast enough, I wouldn't ask for anything more. I stood in the center of the room, the silence folding around me like a coat I didn't choose. I reached out and let my fingers touch the wall. It was rough and cool, like the shoulder of someone you bump into on a street and never see again. The concrete held no warmth, just stillness. Dust clung to the corners, where no broom had been in months. I looked around. No lamp, no curtain, no chair. Just pipes running along the ceiling that groaned once, then quieted like they, too, were tired of being heard. I pressed my hand flat against the wall. It didn't give. Of course it didn't. Some things don't. The shadows crept longer as the light shifted. I pulled my sweater tighter, feeling a small draft come in from a window slit near the ceiling. Just enough to notice, just enough to feel like something from outside still touched this place. I sat on the edge of the bed. It dipped beneath me, slightly uneven, like it wasn't ready for someone to settle. But I didn't move. I let the truth come. This wasn't a place where someone would bloom. This was where you wait. Quietly. The pillow gave when I touched it, already soft in the middle. I fluffed it gently, but it wouldn't lift. I leaned in and caught the faintest scent, someone else's shampoo, not fresh, just lingering, like memories. I paused, holding it in my hands. Who had been here before me? I wondered if they folded their clothes neatly, hoping not to be a burden. If they kept their voice down, stayed out of the way, left lights off, I wondered if they waited too. I laid down slowly, the mattress unfamiliar. It dipped in places my back didn't know, my body uncertain where to rest. My shoulder sank more than the rest of me. It made my spine curve like it was remembering something, crooked. I stared up at the ceiling and tried to find comfort in shapes that weren't there. Nothing settled. Not the bed, not the air, not me. "Good night," I said softly, out of habit. No one was there to hear it. But I said it anyway, like I used to at the end of long days, whispering over the heads of sleeping children. I used to kiss their foreheads and tuck the blanket just so. Now I just had myself. And 4 quiet walls. The lights were off. A soft hum came from the heater, steady and low, almost like a sigh. Not loud, not complaining, just letting go. I waited a moment, listening, no footsteps, no voices. Just the soft, electric breath of a house I didn't belong to. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and let my eyes close, even though sleep wouldn't come easy. It was the kind of night where nothing speaks, not even the walls. The floor used to feel warm in the mornings, especially on Sundays. That golden kind of warm, where the sunlight touches the tile just right and your feet almost hum against it. I'd be standing at the stove, spatula in hand, when I'd hear the familiar rhythm, bare, feet slapping the tile. Then a tiny thud. "Mama!" He'd shout, socks half on, sliding around the corner like a cartoon. He'd crash into my legs, arms flung wide. I'd laugh every time. "Careful, honey," I'd say, pretending to scold. But he'd just rap, his arms around my knees like I was his favorite pillow, and say, "I made it without falling today." Maple syrup bubbled in the pan. Coffee hissed in the old percolator. That little breeze from the open window carried in the scent of leaves and damp earth, and I remember thinking, this is what happiness feels like. Not the big things, just this. He'd wiggle out of my grasp and run to the table, dragging his favorite spoon across the floor as he went. I still remember the sound of it, like a tiny bell echoing through time, and the way my heart swelled then. I didn't even notice. That's the thing about those days. You don't always feel them wrapping around you. You just live with them. Breathe them. Now, I would give anything to hear that spoon again. He never made a fuss when something broke. He'd just go get his tools, always the same quiet calm, the same soft humming. A low tune, steady as his hands. One morning, the window, latch in the kitchen was stuck. I was drying the dishes when I heard the hum, then the creak of the old stool he always stood on. I peeked over, and there he was, half a pencil tucked behind his ear, fingers dusted with sawdust, working quietly like the house was something he loved. "You need help?" I asked. "Nope," he said with a smile. "She just needs a little patience, like all of us." I watched the way he worked, precise, slow, like nothing could rush him. And I remember thinking how love isn't always in the big words or the gestures. Sometimes it's in the way a man fixes a window before you even notice it's broken. The radio crackled from the corner, an old song neither of us really knew, but he tapped his foot to it anyway. When he finished, he stepped down, gave the latch a test click, and said, "There, just like new." That was the man I married. No speeches, just repairs and coffee. And back then, that was more than enough. There was flour on everything. The counter, the floor, the tip of my nose, and somehow on the dog's tail, though I never figured that part out. "Don't eat the dough," I called out, knowing full. Well, 2 tiny fingers had already snuck a taste. "It's not ready yet." 2 sets of giggles echoed from behind the table. My oldest peeked out, cheeks puffed like a chipmunk. "I didn't," she grinned. "Me neither," her brother mumbled. Mouth full. I turned back to the stove, smiling. The oven timer blinked like it had a secret. When I opened it, the heat rushed out and wrapped around me, soft and cinnamon sweet. The rolls had puffed perfectly, golden, soft, just the way they liked. The scent filled the whole house like music, warm and sticky and safe. They ran toward the oven, hopping from one foot to the other in excitement. I waved my spoon. "Hot. Give it 5. But it smells ready," they whined together. Back then, I didn't think I was making memories. I thought I was just making breakfast. But now I see how much of their childhood lived in that smell. At that moment, and maybe some of mine too. The screen door always had a rhythm. First, a slam, sharp, clear, announcing someone's exit. Then the whisper of it closing again, like it had been taught to soften its second breath. I used to listen for that sound while stirring soup or folding towels. It meant they were playing outside, that the air was warm enough for bare feet and muddy hands, that the house was breathing and the day was unfolding just as it should. Through the window, I could hear shouts, half arguments about rules in made-up games, laughter that rose and fell like birds in flight. And then quiet. Not the scary kind. The good kind. The kind that meant they were lying in the grass, staring up at clouds. I never worried in those silences. I trusted them. I trusted the world. The wind chimes outside would sway gently, each note falling into the next like a lullaby. Miss that kind of trust, that kind of rhythm, where even the door knew how to say goodbye and come back again. We had 2 chairs that rocked. Mine had a faded cushion with sunflowers. His had plain blue stripes and a little tear in the seam he never bothered to fix. We'd sit side by side, coffee in hand, eyes half on the kids playing and half on nothing, at all. Sometimes he'd say something like, "Looks like rain later," and I'd nod. Hope it holds off till the laundry dries. That was it. No deep conversations, no big moments. But it felt full, somehow, like we didn't need to talk to feel known. His hand would rest on the armrest, fingers tapping in time, with the ticking clock in the living room. I always thought we had more time, that someday we'd get around to saying all the things we hadn't yet, but time doesn't wait. And now his chair still rocks when I walk past it. Just a little, as if it remembers us sitting there, side by side. I can't tell you when it happened, when things began to shift. Maybe it was when school started again and the house stopped, smelling like syrup on weekdays, or when he stopped fixing the loose drawer in the hallway. I remember noticing the cinnamon ran out, and I didn't replace it. I told myself I'd get some for the holidays, but I never did. The light in the house changed, just slightly, like the corners didn't glow quite the same. I started turning on lamps earlier, not because I needed them, but because I missed the warmth. The kids were still there, the house is still full, but it felt like everyone had started drifting, not away, just around me, like leaves in a slow wind. I used to think I'd recognize the end of something, that there'd be a sound, a sign, but there wasn't. Life doesn't knock. It slips in quietly, rearranges the furniture, and leaves you wondering when the room stopped feeling like home. I was just leaving the bathroom, towel folded over my arm, when I heard her voice. It floated down the hallway like steam, light, casual, like the kind of thing you say while flipping through a catalog. "She's only staying till March," she said, not angry, not even irritated, just matter of fact. I froze, halfway down the hall. The door to her room was mostly shut, but light spilled out through the crack beneath it. Her voice was steady, amused almost. Like I was a piece of furniture with a return policy, my fingers tightened around the towel. "The edge of it is still damp. After that, we'll see," she added. There was a small laugh, then silence. It didn't sting, not the way sharp words do. It sank, slow and quiet, like a stone in the deepest part of my chest. No splash, no sound, just weight. I stared at the hallway runner beneath my feet. The pattern suddenly looked unfamiliar, like I'd stepped into someone else's home. And maybe I had. The scent of dryer sheets lingered in the air, warm and false. I turned and walked back toward the stairs, slow, careful, like I didn't want the floorboards to catch me listening. Whatever that was, it wasn't meant for me to hear. But I did. I stepped back, careful not to let the floor creak. I felt like a child again, caught somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Only this time, I hadn't done anything wrong. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, towel still, in hand. My heart thudded a little too hard, like it was trying to apologize for something I hadn't said. I went downstairs and folded the towel again, even though it didn't need folding. I smoothed the corners and placed it on the chair like a chore, completed, just to give my hands something to do. Dinner was quiet that night. The clatter of forks and clinks of glasses filled the space where words should have been. My granddaughter asked for more corn. My daughter-in-law poured herself another glass of wine. My son asked about school pickups. I passed the bread basket when it came to me. I smiled like it didn't tremble at the edges. No one noticed. "Everything all right, Mom?" my son asked once, glancing at me just long enough to not mean it. I nodded. Of course, the chicken was a little dry, the gravy was too salty, but I ate it all. Every bite. Because sometimes the only thing you can do is keep chewing. She said it like it was the weather, like rain might come tomorrow or don't forget to grab milk. She's only staying till March. So breezy, so easy. Stood there later, brushing my hair in the quiet of the basement, and I kept hearing those words, playing back like a radio stuck on one awful station. Just till March, just like I was a mild inconvenience, a misplaced umbrella. Something you store till spring cleaning. I used to be the one who made things certain. I set the table every Sunday. I marked birthdays in red pen. I made pot roasts and paid attention to every tooth lost, every fever broken. Now I was penciled in. I stared at my reflection in the little mirror propped on the shelf. My eyes looked faded, like a photo left in the sun too long. There was a cool draft crawling down the stairs that night, the kind that gets into your sleeves and settles under your skin. I pulled my sweater tighter and sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to think of all the ways I'd become temporary. I didn't cry. I just sat there, wondering when I became a maybe. There was a knock, soft, like she didn't want to wake a baby or a conscience. "Hi," she said with that smile. "We've been thinking of rearranging some rooms." Behind her, my son stood with his hands in his pockets. He didn't meet my eyes. I nodded before she even finished. "Sure." She stepped aside like she was giving me space to speak, but the air was already full of things we weren't saying. I folded my sweater across my lap, smoothing the fabric like it was the most important task in the world. "We just thought it might be more comfortable for everyone," she added. More comfortable. That's a word people use when they're making space, by shrinking someone else's. I glanced at my suitcase in the corner. It looked smaller than I remembered, like it had shrunk in the shadows. My son shifted. "It's just for a while. Until things settle." "Things settle," I smiled. "Of course. Let me know where I should go." She smiled again, a little relieved. "Thanks, Mom." The light above us flickered for a moment, just enough to make the shadows dance. He didn't touch me, not a hand on my shoulder, not a squeeze of the fingers. Not even a glance that lingered long enough to mean, "I see you." He stood there just behind her, like he always had as a boy. But now, he didn't move. I remembered when he was little. He had a habit, 2 gentle tugs on my hand when he wanted something but didn't want to say it aloud. Sometimes he'd tug and whisper, "I'm tired," or just, "Can we go home?" I would kneel and brush his hair back, say, "We are home." But that night, he said nothing. She spoke for both of them, and when she finished, he nodded once, almost like a reflex. Then he turned and walked back, down the hallway. He didn't wait for me, didn't turn off the light beside the stairs like he usually did. Just the hallway lamp. Just enough darkness left behind to remind me I wasn't meant to follow. I stood there, watching him go. That was all I could do. I sat on the edge of the bed, lamp casting a soft circle around the calendar on the table. March. That word used to mean something different. Daffodils pushing through the frost. My youngest's birthday. Warm rain tapping on the roof. I loved March, but now it looks like a deadline. A soft eviction notice written in pencil. The kind that erases kindly, but firmly. I picked up the calendar and traced the edge of the box. The days still looked like days, but they didn't feel like mine anymore. I didn't know where I'd go, but I knew I'd have to. The clock ticked behind me, slow and steady, like it had all the time in the world. I didn't. I folded my hands in my lap. No prayer, no plan, just stillness. The ache wasn't loud. It rarely is, but it settles deep. Quiet, like something you carry in your bones. Their laughter rolled through the floorboards like footsteps I wasn't invited to follow. It started soft, just a chuckle, maybe two. Then it grew, round and full, and effortless. Like whatever was being said was truly funny, truly warm. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and held it there, trying to pretend the sound didn't reach me. But it did. It wasn't loud. That's the thing. It was just full. Full of everything I used to be a part of. The scraping of chairs, the clinking of plates, someone telling a story too long but worth telling. The way a table comes alive when no one's in a rush to leave it. My name was never called, not once. Waited. I told myself I'd hear footsteps coming down, maybe my grandson asking if I wanted dessert. Maybe my son remembered that I liked sweet tea with dinner. But nothing came. Just another round of laughter. A fork tapped against a plate. Silverware being set down with satisfaction. I lay still under the worn quilt, the one I'd made myself before we moved here. The overhead bulb buzzed faintly, casting a pale yellow over the wall. The scent of baked chicken drifted down, rich and savory, the kind that used to bring everyone into the kitchen early. I breathed it in, then let it go. That table was full, and I was not at it. There's a pause I know by heart, the silence before grace. Even from the basement, I heard it. Just a beat, long enough for someone to bow their head and close their eyes. Then a voice, her voice, saying the blessing. Quick, light, no stories, no hand-holding, just words. Back when I led Grace, I'd tell the same tale each time, about how my mama would pray so long the biscuits cooled before we ate. The kids used to giggle, grabbing my hands tight, barely holding in their little squirms. I looked down at my lap. My hands rested palm to palm, but empty. Just warmth pressed into warmth. The prayer ended. Forks hit plates. Someone poured a drink. I remember once telling them that prayer isn't just a ritual. It's a remembering, a way to mark the moment before joy begins. But now, joy had already started. Without me. The shadows stretched across the floor, soft and reaching. I felt them, wrap around my ankles, and I stayed there, still and quiet, uninvited to the pause, forgotten in the thanks. The smell was unmistakable. Green beans cooked slowly with a pinch of bacon grease. Cornbread, just slightly overcooked so the edges crisped golden. Those were mine. My recipes. They'd asked for them years ago, wrote them down on little cards I still keep tucked in an old cookie tin. I sat upright in bed, breathing in the memory of it. They didn't ask me how to season the beans, or whether the cornmeal needed buttermilk or plain. They just made it. Without me. I waited. Not for a plate, just maybe a knock. A soft voice asking if I'd like a slice. But the only sound I heard was another round of laughter, then the scraping of forks gathering the last bites. I used to worry about that, if everyone had enough. If the rolls were warm, the glasses full, the napkins folded right. Tonight, I counted the seconds between their joy and my silence. 1, 2, 3. I looked at the clock. Its ticking grew louder somehow. Or maybe the quiet just made everything else seem louder. The air still smelled of cornbread, but it didn't taste like anything anymore. The cot creaked beneath me as I shifted, but not in protest. More like it knew me, the way my shoulder tucked under the quilt, the bend in my knees, the ache in my back from too many days of waiting. I didn't mind the sound. It was the only thing that moved for me anymore. I pressed my cheek to the pillow, worn and flat, and listened to the hum of the pipes above. They spoke in low groans now and then, like the house had a voice no one else paid attention to. That sound became a lullaby, not sweet, not soothing, but familiar, like an old radio playing a song you don't love, but still hum along to because it's always been there. No one touched me anymore. Not out of meanness, just distance. A hand not extended, a hug skipped, a glance moved past. But the cot? It held me. In the way things hold you when you've stopped asking to be held. The air down there was cool and still. I laid there with my eyes open and let the pipes sing me to sleep. He must have been 7, maybe 8. Sitting at the table, legs swinging, eyes wide on the last slice of roast. He didn't ask. He just stared at it, then glanced at me. I remember reaching for the fork, sliding the piece onto his plate without a word. He grinned, wide, innocent, like it was the best gift he'd ever gotten. And maybe it was, that night. He ate with both hands. I poured myself more water and smiled, pretending I wasn't still hungry. I went to bed with an empty stomach, but a full heart. That's what you do when you're a mother. You give up bites and sleep and time. You do it gladly. Now, lying in that basement, I thought of that moment, of how easily love had made space then. Upstairs, they laughed again. Silverware clinked. A glass was set down. No one offered me a slice this time. The memory echoed louder than the present, and I let it. Because sometimes, that's all you have, the sound of a child you fed once, now too far away to ask if you've eaten. The pipes rattled again. Short bursts this time, like they were trying to clear their throat. I smiled, faintly. "Good night," I whispered, eyes still open. It was silly, maybe, but the pipes were the only things that seemed to notice me lately. Not with kindness, but with presence. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked, then silence again. I turned off the lamp and lay back, the shadows shifting slowly along the ceiling. The dim bulb above cast a soft halo on the wall. It didn't flicker tonight. It just glowed steady, quiet. I pulled the blanket up and whispered again, just under my breath. "Sleep well." No one answered, but something about saying it still helped, because sometimes, even the walls, they listen better than people do. I heard a thump upstairs, followed by another, then laughter, sharp, high-pitched, full of joy. The kind of laughter that makes ceilings feel thinner. And then I heard it, that light, rubbery bounce of helium balloons brushing against the ceiling. I'd know that sound anywhere. I used to tie those strings to high-chair trays and used to untangle them from ceiling fans. Music started next, low bass, barely muted. The kind of music you play when people are arriving. Celebration music, party music. No one told me there was a party. I sat on the edge of the cot, hands in my lap, the blanket pooled at my waist. Light drizzle tapped the small basement window, steady and polite. The scent of leftover laundry soap hung in the air, clean but hollow. I waited for footsteps, for someone to come down and say, "Come up, we're just getting started." But nothing came. Joy was happening above me. Real, living joy, and I wasn't invited. I was just scrolling, absent-minded, a way to pass time, to pretend I wasn't listening to the party happening overhead. Then I saw it. A photo posted just 2 minutes ago. My grandson, all dimples and candlelight, leaning over a cake with a number on top I didn't know had come so soon. He looked happy. I'll give them that. I stared at the picture too long, like I might somehow appear in the background if I squint hard enough. Maybe a blur of my sweater, a reflection in the window. But no, I wasn't there. A cake I didn't bake, streamers I didn't hang, a party I didn't know was happening in the house I was sitting under. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed and went black. My reflection stared back, wrinkled hands holding the only invitation I'd get. I blinked, tapped the screen again, and scrolled past the photo. Pretended it didn't matter, but the sting didn't come fast. It crept in slowly, like cold air, under a door. Soft at first, then settling deep, and still no one came down. "She's just resting," I imagined her saying. That's what they must have told the guests, as if rest were something you choose when there's laughter in the air and cake on the table. I lay on the cot, blanket pulled up to my chest, staring at the ceiling. I could hear the sounds above: footsteps, chatter, the occasional cheer, a burst of applause. Not once did they call my name. The scent of frosting made its way down in waves, sweet and bright, like something meant to be shared. But no one came to ask. Rest isn't quiet. Not like this. It isn't hiding under a blanket, holding your breath, hoping your tears don't rise above the noise of the party. Rest is peace. This was silence. I turned to face the wall, pressing the blanket under my chin. The air felt heavier than usual, like even the dust didn't want to move. So I lay still, quiet, invisible, just resting. I waited. First for a voice, then for footsteps, then for something smaller, maybe a knock, a slice of cake on a napkin, a whisper of, "We saved this for you." But nothing came, only the sound of chairs dragging, then wrapping paper tearing, laughter, cheers, the good kind, the kind I used to make room for. The smell reached me, though. Sweet, faint, fading too quickly, like cake cut too fast and forgotten too soon. I used to bake those cakes, chocolate with strawberries sliced just right. I'd whip the frosting from scratch, the kind that made the whole kitchen smell like love. Now I tasted air, and memory, and something a little like rust. I looked at the empty side table near my bed. Once it held birthday cards, a bouquet, little fingers reaching for icing with giggles. Now it held nothing. I closed my eyes and told myself maybe someone would remember, but deep down, I knew they wouldn't. I remember his first birthday like it just happened. He was sticky from head to toe, cheeks covered in pink icing. I had piped stars on the cake the night before, stayed up too late making sure each letter was just right. He didn't care, of course. He smashed it the second we sang the last note. I kissed his hands, even though they were a mess. He laughed so hard, his whole little body shook. And when he looked up, arms stretched out, he reached for me first. That day, I felt like the whole world was held in a giggle and a smear of frosting. Now 10 years later, there was another cake, another birthday. But no sticky hands found me. No arms reached. He didn't even come downstairs. I told myself he probably didn't even know I was here, that it wasn't his job to remember. Still, I do. I remember it all. There was one last burst of laughter. Then it was quiet. I listened as footsteps faded, like leaves swirling away in the wind. A few thuds, a door closing, then nothing. Still, I waited, just in case someone remembered. Just in case they thought, maybe she'd like to come up now, but no one came. The rain tapped the glass, soft and steady, like a clock keeping time. I stood by the window and watched it streak sideways. It blurred everything outside, even the light, upstairs. The music stopped. The lights turned off, and that was the night I stopped waiting. She tiptoed in on striped socks, pink and blue, too long for her tiny feet. They slid across the cold tile as she giggled, arms already open. "Grandma!" She squealed, launching into me like a snowball. I caught her mid-giggle, pulling her close. She smelled like strawberries and crayons, like childhood should. Her hair was soft against my cheek, warm from the sun upstairs. She looked up at me, all bright eyes and missing teeth. I snuck down. "Did you?" I whispered, smiling. She nodded, proud. "Mommy said not to bother you." I brushed a crumb off her shirt and tucked her hair behind her ear. The basement didn't feel so cold with her in it. For a moment, it felt like the old days, when hugs came first, and explanations never came at all. But then she leaned in closer, and everything changed. She leaned in close, like she was going to tell me where she hid the cookies. Instead, she whispered, "Mommy says you make the house smell old." Her breath was sweet, full of juice and trust. Her little fingers tapped my arm like punctuation. I smiled right away, automatically, reflexively, so she wouldn't see what her words had done. "Oh?" I said gently, brushing her hair back. She nodded, completely unaware. "But I like it. You smell like hugs." Her eyes still believed in magic, in safety, in stories that always ended with everyone home again. I didn't say anything more, just pulled her into my lap and held her there. Inside, something shifted, something small, like a drawer sliding out that I hadn't meant to open. Her words didn't come from cruelty, but they came from somewhere, and I knew they'd stay with me longer than she would. She didn't know what she'd said. Of course she didn't, so I pulled her close and kissed the crown of her head, right where her part ran crooked. The softest spot, the one that always smelled like sunshine and sleep. "Want to hear a story?" I asked. She nodded, settling into me. "Once," I began, "there was a ladybug who didn't like rain, but she learned to dance in it anyway." She giggled. "That's silly." "Maybe," I said, "but it made her strong." Her laugh came easy. Mine didn't. I watched the sunbeams stretch across the floor, little dust flakes catching light, like fireflies. She saw magic in them. I just saw time. I wondered how long she'd stay soft like this. How long before someone told her not to visit Grandma so much? I rolled over that night and noticed it, the faintest red light blinking above my bed, tiny, like a freckle. But there, I squinted. It blinked again. A camera, a baby monitor, they'd say, just in case. But there were no babies down here, just me. And I didn't cry loudly. I didn't wander or forget my name. I didn't need to be watched. Still, there it was. The buzz from the wall socket hummed low and steady. I stared at the ceiling, blanket pulled to my chest, like that red light could see more than just movement. Maybe it saw everything else I'd been hiding. My thoughts, my stillness, my aching silence. And I wondered how long it had been watching. The light above my bed flickered again. It always did, but tonight, it felt different. I watched the shadow shift across the ceiling, stretch across the walls like it was trying to find a way out, and I lay there, still as ever. That flicker wasn't just the bulb, it was me, stepping into the version of myself they thought I'd become, the kind you monitor, not visit, the kind people watch, but no longer see. I was just wiping down the table. That's all. A little dust near the corners, a few crumbs from breakfast still clinging to the placemat. I wasn't snooping, I was cleaning, trying to feel like I still did something around. Here. The tablet was lying open, screen still lit, quiet, glowing. It looked like it had been left mid-scroll. I tapped the corner, meaning to put it to sleep, but a swipe pulled up the nanny cam. The little thumbnail showed my room, my basement. Bed neatly made, my slippers side by side on the rug. There was a list of recorded clips. I froze. One finger hovered over the screen like it wasn't mine. I wasn't trying to watch anything. I wasn't. But curiosity has a way of turning into gravity. I tapped one. The screen went black, then blinked to life. The view was from above. A quiet, grainy image of me, watering the basil plant I kept by the window. The refrigerator hummed behind me, and something in my chest began to tip forward, just slightly, like I knew what was coming. Her voice played first, clear, soft, like she was right in the room. "She's watering that dead basil again," she said, giggling. "I swear, she thinks she's Snow White for weeds." A pause. Then my son chimed in, laughing. "Maybe if she sings, it'll come back to life." They both laughed, harder than the joke deserved. I stared at the screen, my face frozen mid-motion on the camera. I was leaning over the pot, gently turning the soil with a spoon. I was humming, Not loudly, just to myself, like I always did. The laughter kept going, like they were trying to outdo each other, and all I could hear in it was this edge, something sharp, hiding beneath the sound. I pressed pause with a shaking finger. The tablet froze on my image, still hunched over my little plant, alone. I used to talk to my children like that. I used to tend to them the same way. Soft voice, patient hands, hoping something beautiful might bloom. Now they laughed at me for it. I sat back, the sunlight slicing across the floor in neat, uncaring lines. And I started to feel smaller than I ever had in that house. Her voice floated out again, casual, amused. "She's actually folding the towels now," she said. "And she fed the dog this morning." My son chuckled. "She's finding her rhythm." Then she added, "Guess we're finally training her to be useful." I stopped breathing for a second. Training me, useful. I was the one who used to write the schedules, pack the lunches, call the doctor. I knew which kid liked which socks. I knew bedtime songs by heart. It was the routine. Now I have a project. The screen kept playing. I sat frozen, the air suddenly too still, like the room was holding its breath with me. "She just needed a routine," she said, her voice bright. "Old folks are like kids. Structure helps." I looked down at my hands, the same ones that had tied shoelaces, held fevered foreheads, signed permission slips. What were they now? Just towel folders? Dog feeders? I didn't know what hurt more, the words or the ease with which they said them. I was still here, still breathing, still remembering every detail of a life they now measured in chores. Then he said it. So soft, so casual. "She's just biding time till the will, like it was a fact, like it was fine." I blinked at the screen. My son, my boy, my baby, who used to climb into my bed when the thunder scared him, who once held my hand with two of his because one wasn't big enough. Now he thought I was waiting for death like it was a countdown. There was no edge in his voice, no meanness, just assumption, as if my existence was now something to be calculated, managed. I blinked again. Maybe it would rewind. Maybe I'd heard it wrong, but the tablet just sat there, cold and still. The words sitting on my chest like stones I couldn't push off. The ceiling fan above turned in slow, lazy circles. My tea went untouched, and I couldn't feel the floor under my feet anymore. I didn't cry. Not then. I set the tablet down with both hands, careful, like it might shatter if I breathed wrong. I folded the screen cover shut and let the silence settle back in. My tea's gone cold. I sipped it anyway. It tasted like dried leaves and the end of something. I stared ahead, not at anything in particular, just the space where the voices had come from. The air didn't move. The chair beneath me creaked, the sound barely louder than my breath. Something in me clicked that day, not like a snap, more like a quiet latch, a slow closing. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't ask questions anymore, doesn't beg to be understood. I set the cup down and folded the dish, towel in my lap. The house was still, but I was quieter. That strip of sunlight still touched the rug. Same one that came through every morning, same warmth, same angle. But I didn't reach for it like I used to. I folded the throw blanket and set it neatly on the couch. My tea mug clinked softly as I placed it in the sink. No one heard it. No one needed to. I didn't move slower. I didn't rush. I just moved differently, not softer, not sharper, just done. I walked back downstairs, the steps not heavy, but not light either. That same sunlight stayed on the rug, warm and bright, but it wasn't mine anymore. She smiled as she typed. "Let me update that for you, Ms. Aldridge. Ms. Aldridge, It had been decades since I'd heard it. My maiden name. My name before I belonged to anyone else. Before I was introduced as someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's guest. It landed on me like sunlight, gentle and certain. She didn't flinch, just typed and clicked and smiled again, like I hadn't just felt my whole body shift under that one name. The bank smelled of lemon cleaner and paper, ink drying in the air. There was a clock ticking behind the counter, steady like my breath, as I signed my name, on the dotted line, a new account, a new address, a withdrawal, and a beginning. I folded the receipt carefully, tucked it into my purse like it was something precious. When I stepped outside, the spring light hit, my face just right. I looked down the sidewalk, no one beside me, and smiled without thinking. It didn't feel like freedom all at once, but it felt like something close. Clara didn't ask me anything. She didn't lean forward or furrow her brow. She didn't prod. She just handed me a cup of coffee, sat beside me on the porch, and said, "I know a place. It's small, but it's sweet." I nodded once. That was enough for her. An hour later, she pressed a silver key into my palm. Just like that, like it was always meant to be mine. The weight of it settled into my fingers like safety. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Lilacs were blooming by her mailbox, their scent heavy in the breeze. The breeze didn't ask for anything either. It just passed through. "Thank you," I whispered. Clara didn't say "you're welcome." She didn't say anything. At all. She just gave me the kind of kindness that doesn't come with conditions. The kind that feels like a doorway. The first thing I did when I stepped into the cottage was open the curtains, every last one. Dust danced in the beams of morning. Sun, floating gently like it had been waiting to be noticed. I let it. The windows groaned softly. The floor creaked under my steps. The scent in the air was clean, wood and lemon soap and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe hope. I took a deep breath, and it filled parts of me I'd forgotten. I had. The walls were plain, the shelves are empty, but they didn't feel lonely. They felt like pages that hadn't been written on yet. I stood there, in the middle of the room, letting the sun touch my face. No one asked me to explain why I'd opened the curtains. No one told me to keep them shut. I let the light in, and for the first time in a long time, I felt it land on parts of me that still knew how to grow. It was just a little lamb, a yellow shade. A short neck, a pull chain that clicked in that soft, satisfying way. I found it at a thrift shop tucked behind a row of picture frames. It wasn't beautiful, not by anyone else's measure, but something about it reminded me of afternoon sunlight, behind old curtains, warm, muted, gentle. I brought it home and set it on the nightstand. No one helped me carry it. No one had to approve. When I clicked it on, the glow was soft and golden. Not bright, just enough. I sat beside it, resting one hand on the box I hadn't unpacked yet. The scent of cardboard lingered in the air, faint and dry. I looked at that little lamp and smiled, not because it was special, but because I chose it. The tea was warm in my hands, just the way I liked it. Lavender with a hint of honey. I sat on the porch and breathed in. No one watched me. No blinking red light. No quiet footsteps waiting just beyond earshot. Just me, and the breeze, and the gentle sound of wind chimes, moving like silver ribbons in the air. Birds chirped somewhere nearby. One called twice, then paused, as if waiting for a response. I didn't speak. I just sat, breathing in, breathing out. And for the first time in months, I felt like my breath belonged to me, that it didn't need to be quiet or measured or hidden. It moved the air, not the other way around. I looked out over the garden, where soft soil met fresh shoots of green. Nothing asked to be admired. but everything bloomed anyway. I curled my fingers around the mug and let the silence keep me company. The key turned, in the lock, not with effort, not with hesitation, just a smooth, gentle click. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, the sound landing with a softness I hadn't felt in years. No one would turn this knob for me. No one else had a copy. I leaned against the door for a moment, just breathing. The porch lantern flickered outside. Twilight poured through the window, casting gentle shadows across the wooden floor. The air smelled like jasmine and cool stone. My home, not borrowed, not shared. Mine. I looked around the little room, the lamp, the folded blanket, the plant on the windowsill, and felt something settle inside me. Not pride, exactly, but something close. Didn't wait for applause or permission. Just the click of a lock turned from the inside, and the hush of a house that knew I was finally home. The soil gave way beneath my fingers like an old friend, soft and familiar. Damp from the morning dew, it clung to my palms and I let it. There was something about that texture, gritty but alive, that always brought me back to myself. The garden was still waking up. The wooden steps behind me creaked once, then fell quiet. A breeze passed through, brushing the scent of cut grass across my cheeks, and somewhere nearby, a bird chirped once and went silent, as if watching. I pressed down again, anchoring the violet's roots into the cool earth. "Here you go, sweetheart," I whispered. "This time you've got space." It had been so long since I'd gardened like this. Not just pots on a windowsill, not houseplants hidden behind blinds, but real earth. Sky overhead, my knees in the grass. Back when I was 20, I'd plant violets in rusted tin cans on the fire escape, dreaming of a backyard I could call mine. I'd talk to them, name them, give them little pep talks when the leaves wilted. It felt silly then, but safe. And now? Now I didn't feel silly at all. I felt home. I brushed the soil from my fingertips and sat back, the smell of fresh dirt settling. Into my sleeves, they were planted, and so was I. They opened slowly, as if nothing could rush them. Their purple petals stretched wide under the midday sun, soft and certain. The violets didn't ask for permission. They didn't need reassurance. They bloomed because they were ready, because the light found them and they knew how to receive. And I crouched beside them, my shadow falling gently over the bed. A bee buzzed lazily past, looping through the lavender like it had all the time in the world. And maybe it did. I leaned in close. "You look just right," I murmured. Back then, when I spoke to my plants, I did it half hopefully, hoping someone might overhear, that someone might pick up on the gentleness I was offering the world, even in silence. But this time, I wasn't speaking to be heard. I was simply speaking, because something in me needed to say the words, and something in them, maybe in their stillness, maybe in their bloom, understood. The breeze picked up slightly, rustling the leaves. The scent of violet and lavender wove through the air like a thread tying me to this moment. They belonged. So did I. They came up the garden path in little waves, one at first, then two, then more. Some had pots, some didn't. One boy held a cracked bowl with a single sunflower seed in the middle. Another had a coffee can with holes punched in the bottom. "Is this okay?" One girl asked, holding out a teacup with no handle. "It's perfect," I said. We knelt in the soil together, knees bumping, elbows brushing, dirt under every fingernail. The breeze stirred their hair while the trees whispered above us, and laughter, gentle, uncertain at first, floated up like smoke. "Why do you talk to them?" a boy asked. "Because they listen," I smiled. They giggled. One girl asked if violets minded being moved. "Only if you move them without care," I said softly. They nodded like I'd handed them something valuable. We worked slowly. I showed them how to loosen the roots, how not to press too hard, How? To wait between waterings. The dirt clung to our skin, and no one seemed to mind. The sun fell across their cheeks, and for a moment, the world felt small and kind. They came with empty pots, and I gave them what I could. I used to think silence meant disappearing. That if I didn't explain myself, if I didn't fill the room with words, I'd be mistaken for someone who didn't feel deeply, who didn't mind. But here my silence did something different. It gave shape to things. It marked the edges of me, not as a wall, but as a soft border, like a garden fence made of wild vines and wooden stakes. It told people where I ended and they began. I didn't owe anyone a story, not here. The violets didn't ask why I planted them. The sun didn't request a reason to shine. Late afternoon light spilled through the flowers, golden and low, touching everything without asking to be let in. Birdsong drifted from a nearby tree, faint and full, and I just kept planting, quietly, steadily. My silence wasn't hiding anymore. It was home. She was smaller than the rest, one violet tucked close to the base of a rock, her stem leaning, petals curled slightly to one side. The color was deeper than the others, a shade richer, not perfect, but bold. I knelt and brushed the soil away from her leaves, careful not to press too hard. "You'll be mine," I whispered, not because she was the most beautiful, but because she wasn't. I used to fear imperfection. I used to clip the wilting leaves before anyone noticed, straighten picture frames, smooth my clothes, hide anything that looks like a struggle. But now, I saw it for what it was. Character. She bloomed, a little crooked, and I loved her for it. The air smelled like mint and lilac. Evening was stretching out slow, shadows climbing the garden fence like old friends returning for supper. I pressed my palm lightly to the soil beside her. "I'll be here," I told her. And this time, I meant it. There was a time I'd leave. The door cracked, just in case someone came by, in case someone remembered, in case someone needed me again. But tonight, I let it rest. The porch light stayed off, not because I forgot, but because I wanted to see the dark settle in, quiet and complete. The violets didn't fold their petals when no one looked, and neither did I. The warm hush of the garden moved through the window, filling the room with the smell of settling earth. No announcements, no audience. I didn't need to be found. The world spun on gently, without a knock, and I was finally okay with that. Thank you for staying with me through the quiet blooming of my second beginning. If you've ever found strength in the soil of your own solitude, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this one sat gently on your heart, you're welcome to subscribe. I've got more light to share.